Welcome to the Ground and Pwn podcast, an up until now weekly show for fans of combat sports, gaming, entertainment, and plenty more. I'm Brian Shea, online content director at Game Informer, joined as always by Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter. As we mentioned at the tail end of last show, this is going to be the final episode of Ground and Pwn, so we're going to skip most of the timely MMA and gaming talk in favor of two topics that we've actually wanted to discuss for a while here. I think some of these actually stretch all the way back to the origins of when we were talking about this show and doing it together. But first, Scott, I have a very important question for you.
What do you got?
We started this show with talking about the best MMA video games of all time. I want to ask you, and I'm putting you on the spot here, I did not tell you I was going to do this beforehand. What is the best UFC video game of all time?
The best UFC video game of all time is UFC Undisputed 3.
Okay. I respect that answer.
Simple.
I respect that answer.
Easy. And it's 11 years old. It came out on Valentine's Day 2012. I actually did have this tab up for on my computer because I figured we'd end up talking about this game for one reason or another. So despite the fact that you dropped the bomb on me and I really did not know, I was ready.
I do remember getting UFC Undisputed 3. That was a great game. Anderson Silva on the cover, right?
Anderson Silva is head kicking. I mean, it looks like Stephan Bonner, but that didn't happen yet, so it's probably just random guy. I can't really tell.
Okay. Well, I remember vividly going to get that game and just being so excited. I loved, was it UFC Undisputed 2010? Was that the second one?
I believe so, yeah. I think it was 09 and then 10. Yeah, it was 2009 Undisputed. It was Undisputed 2010 and then Undisputed 3.
This was right before Dana White and EA Sports put aside their differences. Because remember, EA Sports did the EA MMA with Fedor and Randy Couture on the cover, correct?
It was.
And I remember that, this was kind of when Randy Couture was on the outs with the UFC, which was a lot of time. But I remember after Randy Couture signed that deal, Dana White had already had his thing about how EA came to us and we wanted to pitch them on the idea of doing a UFC game. And then I guess EA Sports we don't see the MMA on the same level as football or soccer or golf. So that's why Dana went with THQ. And then he said when EA wanted to do the MMA game, he was like, well, they told us they didn't see this as a thing. And then we put out these Undisputed games and we explode a little bit. And now they suddenly want to do this game. Anybody who signs to be on the EA MMA game is out of the UFC. I remember that decree from Dana back in the day. And that's why there's not a whole lot of UFC fighters. At the time, Randy Couture was about it, right?
As far as UFC? Well, as far as Randy had a special deal kind of in there. So if I recall, he was able, if maybe I'm mistaken here, I've been working off of memory, but he didn't want to sign away the likeness and all that kind of thing. And I think it was already kind of contractually okay. Maybe I don't know this either, but I could swear that was it.
So what I thought was that he had signed the deal with EA MMA prior to Dana making that decree.
Yeah. I believe so. I think it was kind of one of those grandfathered in things. Maybe that was what it was.
But
here's the thing. You're talking about, obviously Dana was like, oh yeah, all that stuff. He's just saying things to posture. And when it comes down to it, EA was able to give them more money for the license. So the end.
I remember Dana holding that press conference. Dana holding that press conference and being like, this is the big one. We got EA Sports to make a UFC video game. And the first one in particular was not very good.
I have not felt any of these four games has been very good.
I thought starting with 3, they started getting pretty good.
I think they've been shades of not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think
to call that what it is on the sliding scale, but I don't know. I've never really sat down with one of the EA UFC games and said, "Oh, this is really good."
EA Sports UFC 3 was the sweet spot for me. I thought that was when they started hitting their stride. Thought they did some good stuff. UFC 4 made some good improvements, but they also took some steps back in some ways. And I think I've scored them 8.5, 8.25 respectively. And did I do 2? I don't know. I may have given it an 8 out of 10. 2, I was like, okay, they're starting to put some actual features in this game. Whereas EA Sports UFC 1 was not super feature rich, but I didn't review that for Game Informer. I don't think. I don't know. They all kind of start to blend together, but yeah, go ahead.
I think I reviewed all of the games. It may not be all of them, but I definitely reviewed UFC 4 for Den of Geek a few years back. And this is the headline we had here was UFC 4 review, best of the series, but still no champion. Now, obviously, this is working with a pre-build. You only get to see not a pre-build, but the pre-release. You don't get to kind of feel every element out. So I don't know if I feel like it definitively was better than the fourth one, but I liked a lot of things in this game better than 3. But ultimately, I never really felt comfortable with it. I liked a lot, especially of the additions they made, kind of the aesthetic stuff. Like when you do the kind of the what's that?
You mean the emotes before when like you're getting announced?
No. More like when you're, especially in the striking only versions where you can do kind of the blood sport setup and
yes, like the custom arenas
setup. Yeah, the custom like they really went much more all out with kind of the all right, let's go like way off script here from the UFC, which is worked extremely hard over the last 10 years to be as sanitized and buttoned up and boring as it could possibly be in all the areas that it can be.
So I need to show you something. I don't think you've kept up with EA Sports UFC 4, but one of the things that they've been able to do,
I will admit that. Yeah.
One of the things that they've done is like, we can add like these various like cosmetics and everything, and they've done a good job of keeping fighters in the game, like adding new fighters and making it so that like, all right,
yeah, I followed that. Like you always say, okay, someone got a 4.5 rating or a 4 rating, or like this guy's a champion now, he gets a 5.
So don't click this link yet because I'm sending you a link.
I clicked it.
The UFC, EA Sports UFC, like one of the things they did was they introduced like masks and like costumes that you can wear. It's not just like, all right, you have to wear the Venom gear or Reebok or whatever it was when this game came out. But like, I think
that's
they did
pretty
add
in line
Venom
with a lot of the EA games around that time. They were kind of doing that in like NHL and Madden and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So that is one of the things they really doubled down on this was like, all right, you can make your fighter your own. You can give them like a head of a lion if you want, or you can do whatever. This was one that they added post-launch, and don't click it yet still. I want to set the table here. I'm going into the PlayStation Store right now. This costs $6.
$6, okay.
$6. You can go ahead and click it, and just know that your soul is never going to recover from this.
Oh, yes, I am aware of the Hasbulla Vanity Collection.
It is I don't know what the Hasbulla obsession is, but like this,
I don't really even like to get into it. It's just not something I like to engage with.
The masks themselves, though, are haunting because they don't look like people. It doesn't look like Hasbulla. It looks like a doll of Hasbulla.
Actually, it does look like a doll, which is probably almost better that it is a mask.
It's just a very weird thing, and I was like, people are paying $6 for this, huh? And then you look at the UFC store, and it's like, people are paying $60 for a Hasbulla fight kit.
Yeah, well, they're charging $60 for a Hasbulla fight kit. Are they paying?
I would imagine some people are.
I would imagine some people. You know what? Some people will buy anything.
But yes, so all that to say, the EA Sports UFC 4 has really embraced kind of like the zaniness of it, like you said, with kind of like the Bloodsport arena with like the Viper or the Cobra head sticking over it, and then like the backyard that paid over because it was Israel Adesanya and Jorge Masvidal on the cover. So they paid homage to like Izzy's like kind of like traditional like video game style like anime aesthetic that he kind of goes for. And then of course Jorge Masvidal's past and history as a backyard brawler. They wanted to have those two custom arenas in addition to all the other like more traditional UFC arenas and like fight arenas that you can go to. Mm-hmm. And I really liked some of what they did. But then there's this thing where you have like Bruce Buffer introduces you and you can do it's not even after he introduces you. It's when the referee comes out to the center and says, "Fighter, are you ready?" And they do an emote that takes way too long. And I don't know why they made it.
That didn't irk me,
skippable.
I guess, the same way it is you, obviously. But yeah, it's a long time.
It's one of the things that I like the least about that game, if I'm being honest, because it disrupts the flow of it. Because, like, I don't know, it's just like when the referee goes, "Fighter, are you ready? Fighter, are you ready?" It's like bang, bang, right? It just like something feels off. It's like you're good, you're ready to go. Like, and you can skip Bruce Buffer's introduction, you can skip the walkouts. For some reason, at least, unless they patched this after the fact, you could not skip the emotes.
This is very much a you thing, I'm thinking. I mean, I'm sure you're not alone, but nah, it didn't occur to me. I know what you're talking about. I think you're right. It's there. And yeah, I guess probably if I played like 500 matches in it, eventually I'd be like, all right, enough. But I
played through the career mode, I think 3 times.
Yeah.
So I've spent quite a bit of time with this game.
I think I only played through the one full time for my review.
By the way, I like the career mode. I like the setup for it for the most part. There's some stuff that I would want to improve, but yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about how to improve the UFC video games themselves, I could definitely start in the career mode.
Well, that's what we are.
I will tell you, by the way, that the set my review was 3.5 out of 10. So
out of 10?
Oh, excuse me, 3.5 out of 5.
I was going to say,
I'm sorry, sir.
I know you're not the biggest fan of the EA Sports UFC games, but that might be a little egregious, sir.
No, well, the headline certainly wouldn't match it. No, it's a 7. I gave it a 7.
Okay. So that's actually that's why we're talking about the UFC video games, because, you know, we're both gamers, we're both UFC fans. That's the entire premise of this show.
Wait, it is? You should have told me 52 episodes ago.
Well, that's why we're ending it anyway.
I've just been waiting to talk about The Last of Us.
That show that I am 2.5 episodes deep into, finally. But so we're talking about how we can make the UFC video games better. We want to come up with 3 concrete ways that EA Sports, EA Vancouver, I think, yeah, it's called EA Vancouver. It used to be called EA Canada. Now it's EA Vancouver. Actions they could take or things they could focus on to make this an overall better MMA experience. So do you want to lead us off or do you want me to go first?
I guess I probably should lead off because I did kind of mention a direction that I want to go into.
Okay.
And I don't want to preface by saying that you and I have both met with the team who work on these games separately, obviously, in our media roles. And they care about this sport. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's always come across in my conversations is they know what they're doing. They actually like the sport. I think they like boxing quite a bit too. I think they certainly would love to get to a boxing game. Just kind of the feel I have from talking with them. I don't know when that'll happen or not, but
I mean, they're the team that made Fight Night.
They did make Fight Night, so they know
what they're doing.
For certain people, they have especially a whole lot of respect because a lot of people really love those Fight Night games,
and they're big fans of MMA in general. Like they have in studio, like Tristan Connolly is their jiu-jitsu instructor.
Yep,
UFC fighter. I don't know, is he still in the UFC? He hasn't fought in a minute.
I, off the top of my head, can't remember. There are a lot of names.
Brian, I went up and visited the studio, and Brian Hayes, the creative director, he knows his stuff.
Yes, he does. Brian does.
With MMA a lot, and he has some really good stories involving Mark Hunt, which is hilarious. And he's met with a lot of fighters. Obviously, there was a very well documented on Instagram visit with Sean O'Malley and Mackenzie Dern when they were adding both of them to UFC 3, I believe. So, they've interacted with a lot of fighters. He's told me all kinds of stories. I think he actually flew to Australia to visit to watch one of the UFC pay-per-views when Mark Hunt was fighting. And he ran into Mark Hunt the day before, I guess at maybe the Fighter Hotel or something. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be sitting right in the front row. I'm really cheering for you." And then I guess Mark Hunt got a walk-off knockout as he used to do quite often. And he looked over in the front row and saw Brian Hayes sitting there, and he just kind of pointed at him like, "You again?" So yeah, he has some good stories involving a lot of UFC fighters, and working with some of these fighters to kind of really get their motion capture right and everything.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a really interesting. The passion behind this team is undeniable.
Exactly. But so when we say these things, we know who we're talking to. But obviously, us being gamers who've spent enough time with this, and obviously we know the sport as well. There's some things, that we'd like to see, and one thing I'd like to start with here is in the career mode. I would like to see some sort of more focused narrative that we walk through. I mean, these guys know how to do that. We've seen that in Fight Night before.
Fight Night Champion was so good.
Yeah. We've seen, and oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name right now, but the name of the character in that story.
God, I know the bad guy is Isaac Frost.
Is that who? Because they brought him.
They brought them over. Him that
they brought over into the UFC game at some point.
I think they put both of them.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's the main protagonist. I forget his name, and then Isaac Frost is the main antagonist that you're fighting. I remember that because it took me so long to beat him in the finale of that career mode.
Andre Bishop.
Yes.
Yeah, I had to look it up. I'm like, I need to do that. Yeah, Andre Bishop I know he made his way over to. I'm pretty sure you're right that we did end up seeing Isaac Frost as well. But the fact is, like that is a beloved mode. Like that's like you walk through a story, and it makes you really driven to continue through. We've seen Madden do that. We've seen FIFA do that in recent years. I think it's absolutely 100% time that we get a UFC story that we get to play through of that type. And I think people would really embrace it.
And UFC 4 started out that way, where it's like, all right, you have like this trainer that you're with, and like you're going through like kind of these regional shows where you're like fighting in like a parking lot under a tent. And then like as soon as you get signed to the UFC, all semblance of like an overarching narrative really falls apart. But I will say that is a very enticing thing for me, but I would prefer to have the option to kind of like blaze your own trail as well.
It's okay if it's to have both. I think that's fine. You can have like a superstar mode, and then they'll call it something like, Path to the Octagon or something, It's some sort of buzz name that they always come up with. Path to the Octagon would be you walking through life, kind of trying to get through the regional scene. You're coming up and there's this rival who's like, he really knocks you down, but then he'll get to the UFC first. You have to, do all these different things. And I mean, there's only so much they're going to do because they're not going to paint the sport in a negative way as much as they can.
It's not going to be Blitz the League.
No, it certainly won't be Blitz the League. Although I can't wait for an MMA game that's quality, that takes that type of playmakers, Blitz the League type of attitude. That would be amazing for a story mode. But I want that. I really want that. I think we kind of need that because the career mode can get just so repetitive. Yeah. And in kind of in the spirit of that too, an actual career mode with a created fighter that you could that wouldn't necessarily be that narrative one, something more traditional. There really needs to be more integration of the UFC path. There should be a Dana White Contender Series option. Why not even have just a fun little mini game experience where you're in the Ultimate Fighter reality show and goofy stuff can happen. It can be super offbeat and goofy and doesn't have to take up much time, but just make you feel like you did something that's part of the UFC experience. I want that. I want to see much more integration of calling out fighters and having actual cinematics. I mean, not cinematics, but cut scenes, I guess. You know what I'm talking about. That kind of thing. And here's a big one. I really don't want to fight 50-year-old Stephen Thompson. Can we retire these fighters? They need to sunset at appropriate times and just add in created fighters. I'm very okay with that. Or even give me the option to. If you say listen, I don't want to get a random guy. I want to fight these guys. I don't care how old they are. What if you have that option? And then you can also say, listen, give me some sort of, procedurally generated fighters that will continue to come on up and I can kind of fight them, or even program a couple of specific guys that just come along at a certain time and they give that experience something special.
So I actually asked Brian Hayes, I think when I was visiting for UFC 3, where I was like, hey, it would be really cool if kind of how the Madden franchise allows you to create draft classes.
Yeah.
Let me create a class of fighters that will come into career mode at some point, or they replace some of the randomized things. And he was like, I mean, we could do that. I mean, it's not one of our priorities right now. That was kind of his answer of we could do it, but it's not currently planned is essentially
I think the general sense that I get, and not from Brian or his team or anything, but just from the general direction of EA Sports video games and pretty much sports games in general is it's all about the online modes, especially the ones can get you microtransactions. Beyond that, I think they want things to be good, but it's not the priority. And depending on the resources and the time, they do what they can. That's how I always read the situation from afar.
Well, here's the good news is that UFC 4 got rid of the convoluted Ultimate Team mode that UFC 3 introduced.
That was stupid.
And I mean, they kind of made it so, all right, if you want to spend money, it's just going to be on cosmetic stuff, which I so much prefer, right?
Like, oh yeah, that's the way to go. I think that's the one that we can all kind of accept, unless you really love cosmetics, in which case then, sorry, you're just going to spend on it.
So I'm going to with my first answer of how to improve EA Sports UFC or make a good UFC video game.
You want to bring it back.
Bring back the Ultimate Team. Yes. Yeah. Give us as many microtransactions as possible. Actually, get rid of like all the non-microtransaction modes. No. What I want the career mode to kind of give you more of like playing off of what you said. Like I want more of the UFC experience. I want to be able to like train with like actual fight camps. Like don't have me like go, oh, I'm training in my basement. It's like, no, I'm training at like Hard Knocks gym or whatever. It's like, no. Have me train at Serra-Longo. Have me train at ATT. I know that's going to require licensing of these camps.
They've had the logos in the games before,
but like I want to like be able to go train them. I don't think you've ever been able to train at like any of these actual camps.
Have at the actual facilities,
be able to train with, and like make it so that like if I go train with Trevor Whitman, it gives me special advantages such as like I'm training at elevation, so that improves my cardio for my next fight, or I'm able to get looks with like Rose and Justin Gaethje and Usman, and you get all these fighters who actually train with these coaches and at these camps, and that will give you special bonuses based on like what that trainer specializes on. I know there's already kind of like, all right, yeah, this gym is good for like your cardio or your strength or whatever, but I want like hyper specific, like this is the looks you're going to be getting, and this is kind of like the fighters and the coaches that you're going to be working with.
I'm willing to even meet in the middle, because if the licensing is kind of like a bridge too far because they just don't want to spend the resources to make that happen, which I would hope shouldn't be a problem, but let's just devil's advocate it here, right? I'm very interested to see if the team could come up with, fictional alternative kind of like not quite that, but close to it, and make up their own, give the world some life. Like, because these gyms, yes, they're established and everything, but we see teams that pop up all the time and put them in different places. I mean, there should be, a notorious or not notorious, but like a very famous gym in Brazil. There should be, all these gyms in the out west, especially, maybe there's some smaller, interesting camps on the East Coast, and then obviously in Florida, there would be focus as well. Make up your own. Like, it's okay. Give them a little personality, some flair, I would really like that even too. It doesn't need to be the real thing for me, but it should have personality. Like you're saying, don't just stick it in a basement somewhere or just some random room. Make it feel like something different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm right there. I want that. I want it to feel like this is an actual camp, because we hear so much about like, all right, like the camp is what made this right, or the gym is what made this camp better for me this time around. It's like, actually because that's one of the biggest problems with the career mode is it feels so repetitive. It feels so samey from fight to fight. They try to do a good job of making it so each opponent feels distinct, and sometimes they do, especially once you get up to those like upper levels of the UFC rankings. But like at the same time, it's like, wow, I'm just hitting through this menu and like choosing how to allocate my time. Nothing feels distinct about each individual camp aside from, I sustained an injury this time. That doesn't do anything aside from it makes it so my jab is a little bit worse this time.
Sure.
Do you want to go with your number two?
Interested. Oh, sorry. Please continue.
I was going to say, I was going to move on actually.
I guess I'm still kind of almost like, because the career mode really does feel like something that like Major needs to it needs a lot more love and time and focus. And again, I wonder if, pressures inside are saying, well, we don't need to do that much on that because we're worried about online and monetization and that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, that's what Madden was basically doing, was like, that's why there was such a revolt in the Madden community. There was a trend called hashtag fix franchise, and they really took that to heart. I visited EA Sports Orlando, aka EA Tiburon, early last year, around this time last year, actually, to kind of get a look at how they were like really taking that feedback. And it seems like that was a kind of a thing that a lot of EA Sports developers were doing, as you had correctly pointed out earlier. And I'm glad that Madden has kind of been like, all right, yeah, the Madden team figured out that they really do need to play to their community with that. And I hope that the EA Sports UFC team does too.
I feel like it's different though, because Madden is just such a driver and it's so like mainstream, and like something like that can really take off. But there's just not these same pushes coming from even the EA Sports UFC community. You don't see that kind of dissatisfaction with career mode. It's like, okay, whatever. Most people are just playing online that are really talking about the game, you know? And I feel like they're satisfied enough with the other element. There's probably gameplay elements they would like, but like otherwise they're pretty much satisfied. I think I get the sense with it. If they're not satisfied, they just don't care enough. You know, there's not a driving force like there was with a hashtag fixed franchise, right?
Yeah.
But I would say just again on the career path here, one thing that I think would be interesting is the way you build your fighter. It needs to change, I think. And I don't know if this is the one that would succeed, but here's a thought. If you say to yourself, I'm looking to build a wrestle boxer, kind of like when we did that, you know, create our own, you know, fighter, right? Mm-hmm. I want to build someone who is elite at takedown defense and has massive power and cardio. Like you can fix 3 attributes that you want to, in the course of your career, work up to so that you are a boss at these type of things. But then maybe you have to get randomly assigned like a negative, right? That you might have to deal with or something. Or maybe you can even have agency and choose that, right? And then your stats will naturally improve as you go. You don't have to engage in mini games and stuff, but your stats will continue to work in that direction. Now, maybe if you perform poorly in the cage, you won't improve as much, or if you perform really well, you can improve even more. I don't know, something like that. I would like to see just a different way of improving your fighter, because a lot of it does become busy work or just menu manipulations and that kind of thing. It gets very boring. There's way too much menu stuff in video games in general. And I would like less of that, especially if I'm playing a fighting game.
Yeah. And they did introduce that. Was it 3 or 4 that they introduced the archetype system?
Yes.
Where you were like, all right, I'm a grappler heavy, or a wrestler, or I'm a kickboxer. But like you're wanting more granular and like kind of a more natural progression, instead of just like dealing with like, all right, today I'm going to have my guy do bicep curls, click. And then that simulates the bicep curl mini game that you don't have to do.
I don't need to do that. Yeah, I mean, if you know that's where I want to improve, like just give me the stat bonuses in that area that I would be working toward anyway, but base it off of how I performed in the fight. And it doesn't have to be that like I mean, you could do this, but I would disagree. You couldn't. I don't think you have to make it, you know, to be better at wrestling, you have to have stopped takedowns or gotten takedowns or whatever like that. Just your general performance. There should be some sort of calculus that says, hey, how'd he do in the fight? If he gets a first round knockout and he doesn't take much damage, like just give me a bunch of points. That's okay. It's a video game. It doesn't need to be perfect. I'm okay with that.
I think that, I mean, I'm on board for a lot of what you're saying. So I think that's a good number 2 for you. Number 2 for me, kind of a career mode, but kind of its own thing. This is a very much a pipe dream. I don't think they're ever going to do this, because they've done it in WWE games, but never in a UFC game. I want a be the promoter mode.
That would be fun.
It is your job to piece together these cards. You got to hit certain ratings based on how well they perform. You got to achieve
Is it be the promoter or be the matchmaker?
I mean, I think it'd have to be both, right? Like, it's almost like when you are like
both. Yeah, I mean, obviously the promoter has some role in the matchmaking.
It's kind of like when Madden, when you choose to be the GM, and it's like you're also the coach, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that with that, you'd be the promoter. So like you're putting together like the cards, you're choosing like where you want to go. I don't know, like how you're negotiating with fighters. You're also, you got to work with egos there, which, lesser games with lower budgets have worked like an ego system into their roster mechanics and everything. So that's not something that needs to like be like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. There's always been negotiation tactics ever since like the N64 baseball games. Like the Ken Griffey Jr. games had a trade logic, and it wasn't the greatest trade logic. I got my stuff stacked every time, but we've come a long way since those Ken Griffey Jr. baseball games. Now there's like free agent negotiations and everything. Just use kind of that similar logic. We have to negotiate with fighters to get them to take certain fights. You've got to stack the cards in just the right way so that you're getting the ratings that you need for a minimum threshold, keeping the fan base happy, you're keeping the fighters happy, and you're making a profit. And I think that would be a super fun mode.
I mean, what we're talking about, just broad strokes over the course of these, suggestions that both of us have made, is that we want more ways to interact with the game.
Yes.
We want them to feel less repetitive and, drilling your head into into the same thing over and over again. It's just give us more ways to interact with this game. And that really should be the theme, I feel like.
Yeah, that would be great. And a lot of it, I mean, all the stuff we've talked about so far has been single player focused.
Yes.
Which
I will say my third has probably an effect on both single player and multiplayer, because number 3 definitively is make grappling fun.
Yes, that's mine as well.
It's not like, it's just not fun. It's not. I love grappling. Like, that's my art. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, a proud one and an active one, which I would like to at least change that one. Get a lot more active at some point. But it's not fun in this game at all. You can take it down to the mat and maybe you're good at it, and it's like, hey, at least I'm good at it. But it's still not fun. Like, this isn't the way you want to engage with it to have a good time. It's probably a means to an end for someone who is going to be weak at grappling. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But it's not fun, and especially the submissions. And I mean, look, they've been trying. I think everybody's been trying to make a submission minigame that works. I don't know. Maybe the solution isn't a minigame. Maybe that's the problem. I don't know. I'm just trying to think outside the box on that. I have no idea what you would do, but
I have thought long and hard about this topic, and like I actually praised the advancements they made in grappling in EA Sports 4. And I think it was substantially better. They also took a lot of like momentum into like takedowns and everything, which is something they didn't do in 3, and they made it so it was seamless transitions from, a takedown attempt, and if it's stuffed, then you go straight into a clinch, or like the momentum is carried into the cage. If like you're trying to do a takedown, it's not just like you kind of like phase up against the cage and you still fall down even though like the cage is right there. It takes a lot of like spatial awareness and everything. I praised that in my review. But you're right. It still has a long way to go. And I've thought so hard, and for a lot of hours, probably more hours than I should, of how would you even solve the grappling problem? Because how do you translate all the intricacies of grappling to 4 face buttons, 2 shoulder buttons, 2 triggers, and 2 analog sticks?
Jiu-Jitsu just doesn't seem like it's very well suited to a video game.
It's tough. Like, you think about
like all those like Olympic video games that used to exist, like every time an Olympics rolled around, like,
and they were terrible.
Yeah, it was so hard to translate all of those things into anything other than like a Mario Party-esque minigame.
And granted, I mean, they're being tasked with trying to figure out about 20 or 30 of these things at one time. So it's kind of tie-in games like that where you only make them every so often. How much can you really expect anyway? But nonetheless, like you still make a good point. It's like it's yeah. I do have an idea though for the submission minigame.
Okay.
I don't think this has been tried. If it has, call me out. But my idea would be kind of something along the lines of like God of War. We were talking about God of War recently. The quick time events, right? You would do the way you would work is if I initiate a submission, right? There would be the 4, the face buttons, on PlayStation, X, cross, circle, square, triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to you and the person you're going against to try and be the first one to hit the one that appears on the screen. Now it would be small and like off to the sides, right? Try to keep it out of the way. Don't make it intrusive. But the first person to get one gets to like kind of get closer to getting what they want, right?
Trying to think,
and then it keeps going. I mean, if you're better at submissions, like let's say you're Damian Mine, you're going against, I don't know, Chael Sonnen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who he has bad submission defense, but I mean, Damian Maya did tap him out, and that's kind of how that thing goes, right? Something like that, it's going to be a lot easier for you to win that game, and a lot harder for Chael to win that game. And it would kind of change depending, but like you definitely want it to feel like winnable on both sides, but also make it so that you can have like a quick submission. That was the one thing that bothered me, is like the fastest you could ever win like a submission in any UFC video game, it's like 30 seconds. It's like,
yeah, there's no slapping on a quick ghillie, or there's no like, oh, he fell directly into an arm bar. Like it was like a whole process.
And I understand like that's very rare, but there's not like, you never have those just like quick, oh, he bit on it, he's got it, and it's over. Like it's just, sometimes those things happen lightning quick. Make it feel that kinetic thing. You're sitting there and you're just like rooting for it. It should be something that's over in like 3 seconds.
It could be.
And the quick time event could happen that quickly. Like if I hit the button and it goes to that, it's like, okay, that's great.
Yeah, I don't know that quick time events are the actual solution, but
I don't either. Hey, this probably doesn't work, but I just threw it out there.
It's an idea for sure that I don't know, I'm trying to think of like, because it's like so much technique and everything that has to be considered with grappling, and it makes it so difficult to even think about ways that they could translate that to a freaking controller. But then again, they've translated
I'm just talking specifically
about
a submission here, though, is the thing. And like once you get the submission in, like obviously there's technique involved, but once the submission is in, you're kind of just trying to fine tune. It's like, hey, can this person get out of it or not? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's it. It needs to just be over quickly. It's not fun or enjoyable. I have no idea how you solve the other parts of that. I mean, the idea I threw out there, I literally thought of it during the show. So take that for what it is anyway. I think it's not bad for something I literally just thought of. But yeah, the rest of it, man, I don't know. I don't know how you solve transitions, but also traditional MMA or modern MMA, I should say. It's not like someone starts in guard and then they move to half guard and then they move to side control and then they move to the mount, or then they try to take the back. Like that doesn't really happen anymore. You get a lot of these like, okay, if they fall into guard, maybe they'll be in that position for a little bit, but oftentimes they don't really stay there anymore. It happens, but it's not as frequent as it is. Most of the time, if I'm getting a takedown, like I might take the back right away. Like the real good guys, like they know how to get the takedown and they're already jumping the back.
Yeah, and it's just so tough to take all those variables into account when it comes to like designing mechanics around it. Like,
sure,
I like even from a competitive standpoint, like thinking about it, because they're really trying to push into competitive gaming, right?
Of course, and I respect that. That's something I can understand.
Fine, since you, for your third one, did my third one, because it's basically the elephant in the room. Sure. I'm going to go back to career mode.
Okay. I think there's a lot. I think we could focus there a lot too. Yeah.
I want them to resurface the simulation logic. I want to see, like, here's the card that I'm fighting on. They've hidden it. It's still, they tell me that it still goes on in the background, but like it doesn't tell you. Like, it says like, all right, here's the headliner of the card. And then like all you see is the result of your fight. You don't see like the entire like, oh, that's interesting. Like, Robert Whittaker beat Israel Adesanya in the main event tonight. It's just like, all right, you're fighting at UFC 302 and I guess you won. And then who knows what else is going on in the world of MMA. Whereas like, you play Madden's franchise, you have a ticker, you have like a section that's like, here's what's being said on social media. Whereas you only get basically your notifications on social media and you develop a rivalry. Like I had a rivalry with Luke Rockhold for the longest time. And it was just like, he would send me tweets. I would have like 3 choices to respond. And then based on that, like the rivalry would get like more intense or it'd get more like friendly or whatever. And it was like, all right, I guess that's just like the extent. I want like the entirety of like, I want to know what's going on in other fighters' careers as well.
I like that too. And I am going to, because we kind of had the same one. I do want to throw another one out there. It is the fact that we need some form of throwback to the other eras of MMA. I think we had Pride mode in UFC Undisputed 3. At this point, I think it would be fun if they found ways to integrate Strikeforce, to integrate WEC. I mean, these are all things they own. They can do that. It's just sitting there. Why not do that? Or even if they wanted to try and go the route of, while I'm thinking of it, kind of that 2K showcase, that mode that we've seen in the WWE 2K games, where you kind of play through a career or you play through like some matches or that kind of thing. You could do that with like special, win scenarios you have to achieve with like Jose Aldo against Uriah Faber. You've got to like land X amount of leg kicks, or maybe even try to top him and get like a leg kick TKO with Jose Aldo over Uriah Faber. More stuff like that. That's what I want. But I might say I'm a different type of MMA fan. I really do care about the past, and I don't know that everybody does.
Well, remember, the best fight ever is always the next one, right?
Correct. It's the biggest fight ever. Absolutely.
Oh my God.
John Jones versus Cyril Gane. Biggest fight ever coming up.
I am trying to find...
For the number 2 heavyweight in the world.
It's funny. I'm looking at like... I'm trying to find like this old article I wrote, which was like the fighters I want in... I think it was UFC 2. And I was just talking about like all the fight. Like I gave a wish list. I remember on that wish list, this was like at the start of like when Israel Adesanya first joined, I said like, yeah, he's got to be in there. I was like, we need like, God, I'm trying to think of like other ones. Like I remember Colby Covington wasn't in it. I think that was when he won the interim title. And I was like, he's like the only like title challenger that is not in this game right now. And that needs to be fixed ASAP. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that they could do, but I do think that they are on the right track. And it's weird. Like, when do you think we're going to get another UFC game? From the rumblings that I hear, this is not me confirming any kind of report or anything. Mm-hmm. The rumblings that I hear is they have one more UFC game under this contract that requires them to create that before they make another Fight Night game. That is kind of the rumor that I've heard. Is that they're going to make one more UFC game and then they're going to make a Fight Night game.
Well, they need to, because there's such an appetite for a Fight Night game.
Or
any form of boxing, whether they bring it back as Fight Night or not, it doesn't matter.
I mean, I would love that. I think that that would be something that they would, people would love. I talked about on the show that game Undisputed. They're kind of doing what Fight Night hasn't done for the last 12 years.
Which is make a game?
Yeah. But like they're picking up where they left off.
They literally are they're crossing the bar by making a game as opposed to not.
But here's the thing. For the longest time, since EA Sports took this over, it's operated on a 2-year cycle. It's been almost 3 years. It's been 2.5 years since we got a UFC game now.
It has, but part of that was, I think, the pandemic kind of foiled part of the plans that they had to begin with, and now they're probably climbing out of it. So I would think that at least has played a role.
Do you think we get a UFC game in 2023?
You're asking me in late February? I'm going to say, you know what? I'll say yes. I could see one coming out in like fall, where they like to put everything out in like a 5-week window for the whole year of EA Sports.
Well, I mean,
I hope they don't. But actually, I would say I feel like it's more likely that we'll get a new one in like February 24.
Well, UFC 3 came out in February of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And then UFC 4 came out in August of 2020.
Right.
But yeah, it's very funny, though, that Alex Pereira is now the cover star of UFC 4. Because they had that thing in the pay-per-view where they were like, hey, the winner of this gets the EA Sports UFC 4 cover for like the new update that we're doing. And I think they were expecting Israel to win that one. And then they ended up with Alex Pereira, a guy who's been in MMA or in the UFC for like a year and a half.
He was literally in the UFC for just about a year before when he won the title, because he made his UFC debut in the Garden the year before.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, we've talked about how amazing that precipitous rise has been. And yeah, I'm not going to say he doesn't deserve it. It's just very funny to see like this, because up to this point, it's been like Conor McGregor, John Jones, Ronda Rousey, Demetrius Johnson, Khabib, like all these huge names, Israel Adesanya, Jorge Masvidal, and now Alex Pereira out of nowhere is now when I go to my Xbox dashboard, that is who is looking me in the eye in UFC 4.
So, Brian, for what it's worth, because again, I do have UFC Undisputed 3 up the Wikipedia page, I scrolled down to sequel, and it's listing all the games that UFC made because THQ lost the license, and it's saying, oh, yeah, EA Sports UFC came out August 2020, and then without citation, so take that for what it is, but EA Sports UFC 5 is scheduled for release in 2023. So take it from this random uncited Wikipedia article. It's coming.
Well, I am actually on. My name appears on the EA Sports UFC 4 Wikipedia page.
Interesting.
So my name's real, so it must be true. Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that we should make the UFC video game. EA should relinquish the license and give it to us.
If they do, I'm making an arcade version though, because I really these are all things that we're working with to improve the current one. But I want to blow it up and make an arcade version. Well, I want one that's like the NBA Jam version of UFC. I think we need that.
Well, we kind of came up with that, right?
Badly. What's that?
In a previous episode, we kind of came up with that idea with making like a Street Fighter-esque UFC game. That would be a blast.
Or I would be perfectly happy if they just took the idea behind Def Jam Fight for New York and then reskinned it as UFC. I would literally take that. That would be. I think people would love that.
Just as many problematic conversations too.
It's actually worse. And it's approved. It would actually get in there and be like, yeah, that's fine.
We just need to keep Sean Strickland far away from that story mode.
It would be about him.
All right. So this was kind of the combination of video games and MMA, but now I want to jump over and talk about our second topic here, which is one of the reasons, like one of the earliest topics you and I came up with, because you are a massive Batman Arkham fan. You love that series.
One of my favorite franchises for sure.
I love it too. So don't make this be like, all right, well, I love this one and hate that one.
That's not what you were saying before we started.
I was talking a lot of smack.
Oh my God, the things you said. I wanted to fight you, but there's a lot of snow between you and me.
There is. Good luck getting to me. I'm buried right now. But I love the Insomniac developed Spider-Man series.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like those two very much.
So I just want to kind of talk a little bit, like, I don't want to really like debate or like compare and contrast, but I just want to like have discussions of how they stack up with each other and figure out like kind of, the reasons that we love these games. Because we both agree that they're both tremendous series and they're both games that we're going to play every single entry. But
starring two of the biggest superheroes that have ever hit the public.
Correct. Before we do that, though, Scott, James Gunn, we talked about a few episodes ago, revealing the DCU slate of movies and TV shows. Who is your pick to play Batman? You are Mr. Batman himself.
In this version, well, what is this version? He's supposed to be. He would be older, right? Because
so it's the Bold and the Brave.
To have Damian Wayne.
Yeah.
I don't know. It has to be somebody who we haven't had before. I wasn't prepared for this question.
I just assumed you think about it 24 hours a day.
No. I'm still focused very much on the Batman. I'm more interested in that than their other version they're doing.
I love it. I need to rewatch that, actually.
Robert Pattinson. It's going to be no. I don't know. I don't know who I have kind of off the top of my head. Let me think about that.
Yeah, we'll come back to it at the end of the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go categorically here. We have 4 categories, and we're just going to kind of talk about the ways in which these games, the Arkham series and the Spider-Man series, excel in these categories. So the first one is world. So Scott, do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to go first here? I'm representing Spider-Man. Scott is representing the Batman Arkham series.
I'm carrying the bat flag. I got the bat symbol up. I'll defer to you, sir. Why don't you go first?
So Spider-Man takes place in New York City. So it's not like a completely distinct world just for this character, as Gotham City and Arkham in particular is in the Arkham series. However, the way that Insomniac Games makes it their own is just a terrific thing. Like if you just zip around New York, by the way, it's so much fun to fly through New York as Spider-Man, but we're going to get into a different category. what ultimately does it for me in this world is the fact that it feels lived in. Like there are actual like people in the streets. There's crimes that you can stop, and you're just like zipping around, you're webbing around. And ultimately, it's all the tiny little nods that this is not just a Spider-Man world. This is a greater Marvel universe, even if the other games don't connect to it. Like you can go visit the Sanctum Sanctorum where Doctor Strange resides. You can go visit the Wakandan embassy at the United Nations. You can visit the Avengers Tower. You can visit Murdoch and Nelson, where Daredevil practices law. Alias Investigations, I believe, where Jessica Jones does her investigation, her investigative research, is part of this world. It's all these New York characters are represented, even if the characters themselves are not in it. And I think that's something really awesome. And it's so cool that they have all these nods and makes it seem like they are acknowledging that these other heroes are in it. And there's little voice lines that Spider-Man will say, be like, oh yeah, all the Avengers are out of town right now. Otherwise, like, this would be really helpful to have them around to like help with like this, all this stuff that's happening. And because of all those factors, I really do love Insomniac's version of New York, and the fact that it feels like a living, breathing city, and it feels like it's part of a greater universe.
That's well said. I mean, it's certainly a love letter to the city in a lot of ways, because I think they really did their homework in appreciating it. I don't know how many of them actually live in the city, but I think they not only created like this, like what the rest of the country thinks of New York, I think they did also make it feel in some ways like real New York too.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciated that. I mean, accurate. You've been to the city enough. You know the city. Does that sound like a fair description?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's great because they have most of the landmarks in it as well. I think there was something with Miles Morales where they actually had to remove the Chrysler building because like the owners transferred or something like that. And they had to, the licensee wouldn't license it for a video game. I don't know if that's going to change for Spider-Man 2 later this year, but like we did actually a feature on or a story on GameInformer.com about like one of our editors was like going down this rabbit hole of what like building licensing is for like building likeness licensing is. It was just like a whole thing. You can go read, I forget who it was that wrote that, but it was a very intriguing read of like, hey, here's what it looked like in Spider-Man 1. Here's what it looks like in Spider-Man Miles Morales. Completely different building in the same spot. But yeah, so what do you have to say about Gotham / Arkham?
Well, first off, we have to acknowledge that it is first at Arkham Asylum, which is not any, I mean, it's obviously Gotham, but it is a very enclosed space, right? They built a very, like, just a fantastic Metroidvania style open world type of setup here, right? They did a fantastic job in creating this area where it's like things are gated off and you think you can get there, but you need to get your, the right tools. But why doesn't Batman have that tool on him? Shouldn't he have it? It's like, well, he wasn't really expecting to need it. He was just going to drop off the Joker. He wasn't expecting all of this to happen. Mm-hmm. Batman's the ultimate prep guy, but hey, he doesn't have it on him at all times. There's just too much to do. So gets these things to find along the way. And you're really able to explore the entire grounds of Arkham. And it felt like a very kind of like twisted, almost fun house in a way. And it was really just the gritty and grimy too, I think was one of the main things about it that you really just loved, is they made this like dirty world that Batman and all of the freaks and the mentally challenged, the mentally ill, are also there as well. It's not just the freaks of the Batman world, but nonetheless, I really just had a great time exploring it vertically, through the little tunnels and that kind of thing. And Batman, to that point, you have to remember when the first game came out, when the first Arkham game came out, it was only like 3 years after they had made the last of the tie-in Batman games, which was Batman Begins, which was terrible. Did you play this game?
No, I didn't.
I
learned my
it
lesson
from Blockbuster. Shout out to Blockbuster. They're going the same way as you and I. The Ground and Bone podcast.
They were the trailblazers of going out of business.
They set the trail. That's right, and we're walking it too. But It was bad. It was just bad. Like it wasn't fun at all. It was hard to really think of like a Batman game that wasn't like at best like, yeah, it's not bad. You know, the Batman animated series games here and there were not so bad. But ultimately were not like, they're not fondly remembered. It's just kind of, they happened and then you moved on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
They gave something special with Arkham Asylum, and they created that world that you really were immersed in. And it, you know, open world is obviously has been in vogue now for 20 years. So it was still part of that rise and everything like that, where everything is open world, but it was an open world that was closed enough and reasonably closed. You know, there were walls that made sense because you were on the grounds of Arkham. You had no reason to leave, really. And every inch of it just felt like something that would have been in Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
And I loved that world. I think they did a fantastic job.
Now, what about when it opened up? Because that's also the world, right? It was Arkham City first in Arkham City, and then it opened up to full-on Gotham City in Arkham Knight.
Yeah, and it honestly isn't that much bigger in Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight, you could argue, it's like, well, why is it more artificially? It's like, well, he's just got things to do there. Don't worry about it. But Arkham City in particular, yeah, again, another example of a very gritty, grimy city. Not so dirty, but like it felt lived in. You know, it didn't feel antiseptic or anything like that. There were so many iconic locations. I mean, Ace Chemical, you know, the theater, which no spoilers, but it certainly has an impactful moment in the movie. The original theater where Batman saw the Mark of Zorro, and well, that was the last time he did anything with his parents. But there's so
wait. Are we considering the murder of his parents at this point in time a spoiler?
No. I mean, elements of that theater come into the plot.
Correct.
Of
yeah. Okay.
I was
spoiler,
like, Batman's parents died.
Let's not be too precious here, Scott.
No. That is not where I'm going, sir. Don't worry. But I mean, there were so many things, and it was a real, like, there were so many things to explore in the city too. There was reason to come back. There was reason to go all over the place. There were so many different people to visit, places to visit. And honestly, it's now kind of, when I think about Gotham, like, I do picture the Arkham City version in particular. When I think about it, you know, we've seen Gotham as, you know, this very gothic place and almost out of like a horror show from Tim Burton. You know, we have that version. We have let's say the more not the more recent, but like one of the more recent versions from Christopher Nolan, which felt a lot more like an actual city, you know. But this one feels kind of like almost like in the middle of both, and I think it strikes the right balance of feeling not real but also quite real.
Yeah, so Arkham, I actually prefer Spider-Man's world to Arkham, especially like Arkham City and Arkham Knight's world. And the reason for that is that they couldn't figure out a way to make people exist in the world, because so it sometimes does feel a little empty. That said, I wrote an op-ed.
There's a plot explanation for it, of course.
There is, but they find the excuse, right? Like they created that plot explanation because they're like, we don't want to have all these people in the streets. But I wrote an op-ed about how, like, it is the exact kind of open world that I love. Like, it just gave me so much to do. It gave me so many cool things to find, and it made it so I wanted to complete everything that I possibly could in that world. I think I did everything that you could do in both Arkham City and Arkham Knight, aside from all the Riddler trophies, because I just was like, all right, I have things to do with my life.
Oh, I hit up all those Riddler trophies.
So, like, I'm not trash talking at all. That's the one thing that Spider-Man has the edge over Arkham, in my opinion, is the fact that there are just people out and about, and it doesn't feel weird. It's not like, all right, well, Spider-Man can go up and kick their ass. Like, no, he doesn't. Like, they just, like, you know, they kind of avoid him if he gets a little violent. And I think that Rocksteady, it would have been nice if they were able to figure out some way to do that.
But at the same time, I don't know how much of that I really like. I don't want a bunch, like, if I'm going to have fights with people in the real world, like as Batman, there's only so much you can do to like have tons of fights with Batman in the world, because he's around at night too, first off.
Yeah.
And like, if you're just going to go out there and like fight a bunch of people in the middle of the street, like there would be cars. A city like that, like it's going to be very busy. Spider-Man, he is able to just leap on top of a car and then web off it very quickly. Batman it doesn't work that way. You know, I think because of the nature of Batman, it's not as well suited to living in a world that's being lived in by everybody in a video game, unless you want to have everything happen in like alleyways or on rooftops or that kind of thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally get the reasoning.
Scenes, of course, could happen on the street, but like that would just be very specific elements, you know?
Like, I get the reasoning behind it. I'm just saying that's why I there's a little bit of a leaning for me towards the Spider-Man world. And just because
you are fighting on that side, so of course I would expect
that. All right, so let's move on to the second component here, and that is the story.
Yes.
And do you want me to go first again?
Yeah, sure. Keep at it, my friend.
So I love the story of especially the first Spider-Man game, but also Miles Morales. I think they both endear these characters so well. They really understand what makes these characters cool. And they include so many iconic villains, especially in the first Spider-Man game. You get the Sinister Six right off the bat with this game. And like the intro featuring Kingpin, like you're just like, oh my God, we're just jumping right in. We're fighting Kingpin. And then it's like, all right, he's off to jail. And he has this line that's like, you don't understand what you're doing. I'm the one who keeps all these criminals in line or something like that. And it's like, whatever, get in the back of this car. We'll be fine. And then it turns out, oh no, he was really keeping everybody in line. And next thing you know, we have a jailbreak happening, and suddenly the Sinister Six are running amok in New York City, and it's your job to stop them. But also, they did such a good job of introducing Miles Morales into the story, and then giving him his own spin-off game. And now, like, they tease of other like iconic characters coming down the pipeline. I mean, we've seen Norman Osborn is in the story. We've seen him multiple times in the story. And then we also see, not to spoil anything, we see some teases of an iconic character, but in a way that we haven't seen before. So, and it seems that character might play pretty heavily in Spider-Man 2, which comes out later this year. But I am obsessed with the story of Insomniac Spider-Man. I think that the way that they get the characters so flawlessly correct in so many ways is just a testament to the care that they have for this, and the fact that it is done in such a way it's like, yeah, these people know what they're doing. They know comics and they know these characters.
I think one thing that, and you know, again, I like Spider-Man. I like the games. So I can't say anything to disparage your arguments or anything like that. But for Batman, when I think of the Arkham games, and the story in particular, I think is one of the strongest elements of it. The storytelling, the way, like the kind of the way that you kind of get onboarded into the story it's great. It's kind of just like you're just walking Joker in, right? That's all you're doing. He just surrendered himself, and you're getting him into Arkham where he's supposed to be. It's like, oh, this is good. You kind of descend in, right? You're kind of walking in. You get the sense of like the storytelling, the scene setting of that kind of thing. Maybe this is part world, but I think this is story. Really, it's showing you where you are. And it's so simple. It's just such a simple premise. You're just in there dropping off the Joker after he's surrendered, but there's more to it. And as the story goes, it's layered and layered, and there's more that you're finding out about why the Joker wanted to go in there. I think they did a great. I don't want to talk deep spoilers on any of these games, even though some of them are less recent, right? But this story, the way it integrates all of the other villains into it, which can be very hard. It's like, why is everybody involved, right? It's because they're at Arkham. They're all here. It makes sense. So everybody, and not everybody's working with Joker. They kind of just are looking for their own peace as a result of what Joker's doing. And you have to deal with that. And sometimes they have more selfish reasons than others, right? Or they have their own motivations, of course. Mm-hmm. It goes to the next level in Arkham City. I don't want to talk deep about every single game. I've got more games to talk about than you, my friend. But in Arkham City, it gets to the next level because what we have play out is I think, one of the best Joker stories, period.
Oh,
best
absolutely.
Batman Joker stories ever.
Until the end. Until the end when he turns into a monster.
Well, no. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking about Arkham City now.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah, no, in Arkham City, that's where it's a much better story. I think the first 100%. one, it's fine. It's fine. Arkham City takes it to another level. That is a fantastic Joker story. Unbridled success, I think, from there. Again, I don't want to get deep into it because if you have never played this, I really just can't recommend it enough, and I won't be the one who spoils a Batman Arkham game for you. Brian just did, but
I mean, they've made toys about that character.
I'm teasing.
By the way, speaking of spoilers, I remember when Arkham Knight came out, and there is a very, very spoilable thing in Arkham Knight, involving some characters.
There is,
and I remember my boss at the time was reviewing it, and he went in his office, and he's like, I'm shutting the door because I don't want anybody to even walk by and look at the screen and see what's happening because it's that big of a spoiler. And I'm like, well, I appreciate that, but now I'm like deadly curious about what this is. But yeah, I actually love Arkham Knight. I think Arkham Knight is just such a great game, and I know a lot of people gave crap about it. But I
think Arkham Knight is a fantastic game, but I do think that it's big twists that they really wanted to conceal as much as they possibly could in the lead up is not that hard to see coming if you know anything about the Batman lore and characters.
For sure.
That's part of the problem that I think a lot of people do have with it is I don't think that they would have been smart to again, I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say this. I don't think they needed to be cryptic about it. I think if they were more upfront about it and didn't make it a twist, it would have been better. I actually think that.
Interesting. But you have to also remember
or spoil it in the first act. Just get the Band-Aid off early.
You also have to remember that probably most of the people playing this are not diehard comic readers.
I would agree, but I think nonetheless, it just felt like, well, why are we doing this? Like you're taking, again, I'm not going down that road, but I think it was a curious decision to me because I just don't see the need for it. I think it felt like, and obviously I'm supposed to be defending Batman. This is a small critique I have in general about the storytelling process across these three games, but I just didn't think it needed to be done the path it did. I think they could have simplified it and it still would have been executed well. And then you wouldn't have had that smaller percentage of people who know this well and saw it coming being like, come on, guys, why are we doing this?
So let me ask you this. Between Batman and Spider-Man, are these the two best rogues galleries in all of comics?
Easily.
Okay.
It's not even close.
The only one that I could have thought like maybe rivaled it was X-Men. But I don't think that even comes close to Spider-Man.
No,
I
don't
Batman
think so.
has the best rogues gallery, and then Spider-Man's a close second.
When we're talking about rogues gallery, we're really talking about kind of the whole breadth of the characters involved. It's not that look, Magneto's fantastic, and there's other villains that would jump out as well. But like, you're talking about just banger after banger after banger after banger characters. And that's another thing about these games is, and especially I think the second one as well, you got that relationship with someone like Catwoman, who you could play as in the second game, by the way. The relationships that you had, Batman has with these villains, they're all different based on who they're with. And I think there was some good natural storytelling with that. I think they do really good, I guess, side quest storytelling as well, especially in Arkham City. And I think that's its own storytelling, independent of the main storyline there. So I really loved the way they did all of that. And, even with you're trying to hunt down Victor Zsasz, right? There's just so many fun, fascinating ways that they went about it. There's even, and this isn't even storytelling, I guess, but I have to shout this out because I thought it was a fun thing, and I kept up with it to get the video game trophy for it. Calendar Man, is in Arkham City. You can go visit him, and he'll just talk all cryptically and all. If you've ever read Long Halloween, it's kind of that version of Calendar Man, which actually makes it a little more interesting and sinister.
Well, that's the basis for Arkham City, right? Is Long Halloween.
Correct. At least it's kind of an inspiration for it in a lot of ways, but it's still its own thing. This game, you see Calendar Man, and if you see him on any general day, he'll have stuff to say. But if you go to him on key holidays throughout the year, he has something different to say each time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get all 12, you get a trophy. And it's kind of fun. It was a fun one. You would literally have to do this trophy all year long, or you could game the clock. But if you do it wrong, you could mess it up and then you won't get it.
Yeah, that's a really smart
I did it right, though. I actually did it right.
Yeah, I really enjoy. I mean, God, it's hard to fault either of these stories, to be honest. I absolutely love it. Let's move on.
I don't think you and I are going to decide a winner on this. I think we're just kind of
gushing over some of our favorite series
and allowing the listeners to decide for themselves.
So the next category is gameplay, and my case for Spider-Man having amazing gameplay is simple. The web swinging feels so damn good. Like, getting around New York City feels about as good as any traversal mechanic ever. Insomniac clearly learned a lot through the Ratchet and Clank series and the Sunset Overdrive game about getting around an area, and they applied that to perfection with how it feels to web around New York City. And, you know, the combat is fun. It's not, I would say that maybe Arkham has the edge on hand-to-hand combat, but in terms of just like traversal, I mean, give me Spider-Man any day of the week.
Okay. That's fine. I would say, though, Batman's combat in particular is what really makes it stand out. I mean, yes, the web swinging, you can't compete with that. I think flying around, gliding around on Batman's cape is a very fun way to traverse, but it also has its limits because you are a man who doesn't have that technical ability to do that, right? He has not developed that kind of technology to fly around. He hasn't needed to, right? He's really more of a try to just stay hidden kind of thing, and it's hard to do that if you're swinging around in the middle of the world, right? It's the combat, though. I mean, this type of combat, it kind of has its origins in, games that have come before, like God of War, right? Like there's at least some kind of, let's say, lineage going back to like that type of thing, but it makes it its own thing. And especially one of the things that makes the combat in the Arkham games so special is kind of the timing elements to it too. Because if you time everything right, you can double your combos. You'll get more ability to get takedowns that knock these people out. You have to worry about, somebody has a gun. You've got to focus on them much quicker and that kind of thing. And this, obviously, these games came out before the Spider-Man games too. So a lot of what Arkham has done, it has to have been in the lineage of Spider-Man 2. It's a predecessor in a lot of ways, and whether they like it or not, I'm sure there's at least some influence there.
Oh, I would bet they would fully acknowledge that.
I would think so too.
I bet if I interviewed them and asked them like about Arkham's influence, I bet they would wholeheartedly say like, yeah, we're standing on their shoulders essentially.
Oh, of course, yeah, and absolutely. But the thing that makes the Arkham games even more different than especially the Spider-Man games is that the Predator mode.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to if you didn't.
Oh yeah, no, I have to. It's a major part of it because I mean, there's two ways to play Arkham, more or less. I mean, and it's not that you choose one or the other. It's just you do one thing or the other, more or less, and then one can bleed into another. The Predator mode, for those who don't know, is essentially when Batman is stealthily working his way around a room, taking people out, and putting the fear of not God but of Batman in them. You can really mess with their heads. You can kind of take one out, hang him there, leave him hanging, and then all of a sudden they find him. They're like, "Oh my God, they got Johnny!" Like whatever. It's that kind of thing. And as you go through the game, of course, it will scale up. There will be reasons that they'll become aware of your presence a little bit more, and that will make it more challenging. You have to negotiate that as well. You'll have more ways to negotiate that, but you can, if you're good at it, I mean, you can just toy with them. It's a lot of fun to just mess around, like leave a trap with like your bat explosive compound and just wait for them to walk by, and then boom, they're knocked out.
Yeah, it is. It was revolutionary in its time, and it's still about as good as any game has done it.
it's very few games like look for this type of. It doesn't really apply to many of the things, so it very much is its own thing. Like maybe you play games for a living. Maybe there's something you can think of that this is similar to since Arkham, but I don't know of anything.
I mean, there's literally the Predator game that was kind of like that, but that was asymmetric,
also wasn't
multiplayer.
Very good.
Correct. But like, yeah, there are games where it's like, yes, you are literally a predator hiding in the shadows, taking out people one by one. That was a multiplayer experience. So like you were striking the fear in the hearts of actual humans who are playing the game against you. But yeah, this game
doesn't reward you as much either. That's the thing. Like because you're playing against a person, they're not scared of you, you know? They're just like, all right, look out for that guy. You know, like the predator's over there. It's very clinical. In here, you get to really watch as you toy with them, and they're like, they just don't know what to do, and they're giving you that feedback that only could be built by the developers to put in there.
Though that's what's really cool. There are stealth elements in Spider-Man.
Yes, there are.
Especially Miles Morales, because he can go invisible and everything. And
I also played those stealth elements more often than the actual like combat elements when I could in Spider-Man, because I like that type of play. Anyway, I like stealth anyway. I'm predisposed to stealth.
And Batman wasn't the only game, or Arkham Asylum was not the only game that was preceded by a poorly made licensed spin-off from a movie, because the Insomniac Spider-Man games were preceded by 2 amazing Spider-Man games about the Andrew Garfield movies, and those tried to be Arkham Asylum essentially. Like they tried to make it so that Spider-Man was a stealth character and he was able to like do all the stuff Batman was able to do, and it was not very good.
Interesting. I wasn't even aware of that. But of course, Spider-Man has a lot of quality games in its past. Not all of them have hit.
The Activision games, especially Spider-Man 2, were very
Spider-Man 2 was well loved, even if all you had to do was chase down a balloon that a kid lost every so often.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at this point, Spider-Man, the Insomniac ones, have far exceeded anything that those games had done. So let's talk very briefly here.
Before we do, I've given it thought of a Batman actor.
Okay.
For this movie. Now, my thinking was, and again, I did this on the fly while we were having a conversation. So, there's probably better names out there, but this is the first one I came up with. And the rationale was I wanted to find an actor in his 40s, someone who's a little older, but probably has the ability to inhabit the body of Batman in some more physical way, even if I don't know what the type of Batman they're looking for is, but I'm going to assume he's much more veteran and older because he has a child. So I have 2 names that I'm going to throw at you, and I'm going to kind of gauge how you feel about them.
I'm ready to Google them just in case I don't know them.
You know them. You don't need to. Number 1, actually, I'm just going to lay them out. Don't even react until I give you them names. Number 1, Michael Fassbender, and number 2, Bradley Cooper.
Okay.
What do you think of those?
I feel like...
And Bradley Cooper could direct, by the way. I don't care. He can do that.
I could see Bradley Cooper being a very good Bruce Wayne.
I'm trying to picture either of them in the cowl. Did you see American Sniper?
No.
Okay, he's very good in American Sniper, and it's a very different character for him than like what you've seen him in, like The Hangover or even Silver Linings Playbook or something like that. There's more. He can play with more intensity. He was also in A Star Is Born, which he directed, and that's also a much more, let's say, depressing type of character. And Batman does need to have some form of depressingness to him, I think, in the way I view the character. I don't know what they plan on doing with the DCU, but Batman shouldn't be all upbeat and making wisecracks like Ben Affleck was.
And have you seen Limitless?
Limitless, I didn't see, actually.
I really like that movie, and it's just a fun movie.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, he shows glimpses of what I could see a Bruce Wayne who is trying to be the complete opposite of what people would assume Batman would be, and trying to hide his identity, being that billionaire playboy. You can see glimpses of that in his personality in parts of Limitless.
And that's why I think, by the way, because it is a dual role, right? Batman is playing a character He's playing Bruce Wayne. So you have to play both of those personalities. I think Bradley Cooper has what it takes to be able to put it on when he goes out and not only be upbeat, but like kind of be believably fake about it. Where he's believable to everybody else, but like you can tell when you're watching that it really is put on. And then when he kind of descends back down into Batman and being who he is, that's when you see this kind of more gritty, grizzled, weary, but also, determined kind of character. I actually think he makes a lot of sense. The more I'm talking it out, it's like Bradley Cooper would be a pretty solid choice. But again, I don't know what they're planning to do. What about Michael Fassbender? What do you think?
I could see that. I mean, it's just
I think
so hard
the physicality is what I worry about a little bit more. He's a little smaller. I don't know that he's going to get it's not like Batman needs to be giant and beefy, but like he can't be small.
So say Robert Pattinson is not a huge person.
No, but he's, a
he's
young
not built
person
like a
in
tank.
His prime,
I will say that Ben Affleck had that physicality part down.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they literally write scenes in movies because it's like, okay, here's where you need to be shown working out or like showing.
You're going to fight Superman. Please do some pull-ups.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's. I like both those picks. I think I like Bradley Cooper a little bit more.
I think I sold him better. I think I did a good job of actually selling it. Like I kind of talked myself into it as we went, but yeah, I don't know. I'd have to give more thought.
Those are the three main categories I wanted to talk about, but I also wanted to see what you thought of, and I'm not talking about a game. I'm talking about like a mechanic or a moment or something like that you consider the low of the Batman Arkham series.
The low of the Batman Arkham series. People don't love the Batmobile sequences in Arkham Knight. It's not the most popular thing. I was fine with it. I have to say I was fine with it. But I know enough people who were not enthused with it that I think you have to acknowledge reality and say this was it was, I think, a good attempt and a good effort and a good thought in trying to make a game play element that felt different and really not just like, okay, here's the same game with a new story. I respect that. I don't think it was the winner they were hoping it would be. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't even have a problem with it. But I did have obviously that complaint about the introduction of the Arkham Knight and the identity behind him and the way they did that. So that's another quibble I have, I guess. Probably that one I feel more strongly personally, but probably less people feel that way.
Okay. So for Spider-Man...
So you're going to have to bounce it back for you. Yeah. How do you feel about the Spider-Man game?
By the way, I like the Batmobile, and I would not say that's the low point of the Arkham series, personally.
What would you say, actually? Yeah.
Probably something to do with Origins.
Okay.
Maybe the
Origins is a little different, though.
But it's still part of the series.
It is, but it's not made by the same people. I know it has Arkham in the title, right? I get it. But a lot of people kind of can write that game off.
Maybe the Deathstroke sequence, as much as I like Deathstroke, some of that stuff just didn't play well.
I will say I actually did like Arkham Origins for what it was. It's just not... I look at the Arkham, I think of the Arkham trilogy is what I would say. And that obviously disqualifies that game because
I think most people do, honestly.
Yeah.
But it is canon. It is part of the series.
Sure, absolutely.
And so for Spider-Man, I'm going to say it was probably, as much as I like the character, it was probably the Mary Jane sequences where you're kind of stealthily sneaking around like these enemy bases and trying to take pictures and stuff.
And unfortunately, that also includes Miles Morales too. He has that sequence too.
Yeah, but pre
superpowers.
Yeah, so like that those types of situations, I don't mind those puzzles, like the switch puzzles that you have to do in the Spider-Man 1 game.
Which ones are you talking about?
Like where you're trying to like hack into something and you have to like redirect like the energy.
Yeah, I actually kind of like mini games like that.
So do I. I heard a lot.
I'm a little bit of a sucker for it. Yeah, they're so simple and like it's like whatever. But like I actually like the I guess the change of pace.
Mm-hmm. So let's get to the final little segment here. We've talked a lot about the legacy of Arkham Asylum in particular and like how it's influenced other games, especially in like the combat realm. So let's really instead talk about kind of what's next for each of these series. The Arkham series is pretty much done. However,
it's going to evolve into the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Yeah.
which appears to be a direct sequel to the Arkham universe. It's weird that Gotham Knights came out, and it takes place in a world that has the similar conditions as where we leave the world in the end of Arkham Knight. And yet they refuse to call that a direct sequel. However, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is pretty much considered a direct sequel to the Arkham games.
Yeah, it's the same world. It's kind of the same franchise, but it's same but different.
And this could very well be the last entry in anything Arkham related because of James Gunn's insistence to connect video games with movies, with TV shows, and have it all be part of the same canon.
He said that, but also they've allowed for, like, unless there's something that's truly standout, right?
Like the Elseworld stuff.
Yeah. They're going to do a ton of that. They still have a ton of it in the works. So it's like, I mean, it's one thing to say it too, but I could see them maybe with the games backing off of that a little bit.
Maybe.
Because we've talked before on this show about kind of the challenges that at least I foresee about it. It's like the cycle it takes to come out with a game is just so much longer than a movie or a TV series. Like, you want this game, if you want to start making the game today, it's probably coming out in 2028.
Yeah. I mean, James Gunn, he's worked on video games, so he probably does have the knowledge of that. But yeah, sure. You're right. There's going to have to be a long lead time.
It's a lot of hurdles to it. I could just see them maybe not saying, how about we come out with no DC content in games for the next 5 years? They're going to have things in the works that are going to come out. And I think if the quality isn't there because it's constrained by the DC universe, and they said, listen, what we're doing over here works, why don't we continue that? I don't think they're going to be, especially with video games. I think video games in particular exist in such a way that they could do those differently. Yeah,
for sure. And especially with the Elseworld label that they're giving the Batman series, and they're giving apparently a J.J. Abrams Superman movie, all kinds of weird stuff that they're going to continue doing regardless of the canon.
Think about this, though. Like, if I'm like my parents... Let's say my parents are very interested in these DCU movies. I don't know how gung-ho they're going to be about it, but they'll be interested enough, right? But let's pretend they're a little more interested. They're like, oh yeah, we want to watch these movies. We're interested in the show. We want to kind of keep up with the story. But they're older. They're in their 60s. My mom just turned 70. Happy birthday, Mom. I love you. She doesn't listen to this show. But you can't expect them to keep up with the game. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be things that are just going to fall through.
Oh, absolutely.
I think games, it's easy to write off. That's where I see it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard enough to keep up with all the TV shows that Marvel's putting out right now. So
tell me about it. I'm glad that it sounds like they're starting to realize, it's actually a lot. Maybe we'll do a little different now.
We're burning some people out, and then
I've talked about that on this show several times about kind of the burnout with it. I would like to be more interested, but yeah, it's tough. So fingers crossed the new direction helps.
Hopefully. And then the Spider-Man legacy, I mean, it's still going. It's one of the most beloved franchises that's currently running, I would say. And we have Spider-Man 2 coming out later on this year. And they've teased that it's going to be Venom and Kraven the Hunter potentially as the villains, at least the first two revealed villains.
Sure.
So I'm very excited about that. By the way, to close out this segment, I'm going to the official Game Informer rankings.
Okay.
Of the top 10 superhero games of all time. And I just want to get your opinion on this list. I'm going to count it down from 10.
When is this from, by the way?
It was updated January of this year.
Okay, cool. So very up to date. Got it.
I've written this, I think, starting in 2016, and I've updated it as we've gone. It's been a group consensus, though. It's not just like my picks.
Gotcha. Okay.
But so although I was again, part of the...
Remind me what it is again. It's the top 10 superhero
games of all time.
Okay, got it.
So we're going to lead off with the only non-licensed game on this list, Infamous.
Okay. It's a good choice.
Very good game. Next up, the original Marvel Ultimate Alliance. That's number 9.
Okay.
Number 8, Marvel's Midnight Suns, which came out last year. It's the Firaxis
I have
game.
No opinion on it, but I know people like it.
Number 7, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Yeah, everybody loves those.
Number 6, Injustice 2.
Great game.
Number 5, Batman Arkham Knight. You're going to start to see a theme with these top 5.
I bet.
Number 5, Arkham Knight. Number 4, Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Okay.
Number 3, Arkham Asylum. Number 2, Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man, the Insomniac one. And number 1, Batman Arkham City.
I take that as an implicit endorsement that I won.
I mean, they're pretty scattered in there. I mean, yeah. But Arkham City is just a masterpiece of a game. And Arkham Asylum as well. I mean, it is. Really, those top 3 are just unimpeachable. Arkham City, Spider-Man, and Arkham Asylum. Those are just three of the greatest games of the last 20 years, period, let alone of, the superhero genre.
Yeah, no disrespect to Miles Morales. I think it was a terrific game, and it was a good introduction to the real world of that character for people who are not familiar with the comics. Because as much as, Into the Spider-Verse is Miles focused, it's a very different Miles Morales story. It's all Spider-Mans. I mean, there's Spider-Ham, there's everybody, right? It's just a different thing. This was very much, okay, this is Miles Morales' story. We're actually seeing that. So that was the first time that we really got something like that at this level. So, but I do think there is a definitive line, kind of like you're saying, those top 3 are unimpeachable. Miles Morales, fantastic. It's the next best one after that, maybe. But it's just not quite in that stratosphere.
I mean, that top 5 again is pretty amazing. It's all the Rocksteady trilogy and the 2 Marvel Spider-Man games.
I think you could even, to be honest, actually move Arkham Knight down. And again, I really do like the game. Like, I really do.
Below
but
Injustice?
I think something like Injustice, should come up. I think I feel comfortable putting that one up. I would even put Infamous a little higher than it is. But again, I didn't play, Midnight Suns, so I don't have any opinion on that. I can't form one. Shout outs to the X-Men Legends games that came before Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I actually kind of prefer those. I have more nostalgia for those games than I do the Marvel ones. I don't know why. I guess I just do. But I mean, there's a good amount of superhero games that have come out that obviously you got to cut off. You're only doing 10. There's some really good games that are not on that list.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones that were removed recently, I think the old school Spider-Man 2 was number 10 before that.
Yeah, it's aged. I mean, there were cracks even at the time, but you overlooked it because it was really good.
Maybe Hulk Ultimate Destruction, I think, was also one that
I love Hulk Ultimate Destruction. Oh, I'm glad you name checked on. Thank you.
It's a very good game. But
really love it.
Scott, I think that's the end of our 2 main segments here. I know we wanted to kind of give some parting words before we close out this final episode of Ground and Pwned.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I really just want to make sure I get off my chest before we leave is just, I guess, 2 things. Number 1, it has been a lot of fun doing this show. I hope and I believe that has come across to you, the listener, especially our very dogged listeners who supported us from the beginning. We really appreciate you, and we really hope that we made your time with us worth it every week for the last year. It has been just a whole heck of a lot of fun, just talking games, talking fights with my buddy Brian here. And that's the number 2 thing I wanted to bring up is my dear friend Brian here. I randomly messaged you out of nowhere on Twitter, which couldn't happen anymore because you're not on Twitter.
Yeah.
I got you in that window to suggest working on a show like this. And you said, hey, I'm thinking about the same kind of thing. This is great. We didn't know each other, but over the course of now a year and a half, I feel like I've gained a really good friend in you, Brian. I appreciate you. I appreciate you not just as a peer, but also as a friend. So I thank you for giving your time to get to know me and vice versa.
Oh, wow. I didn't expect the compliments to start lobbing. Wow. Thank you. I mean, I consider you
Do you have
a very
tissues
good friend
by?
as well.
Okay?
I have some napkins, but I'm saving those saving those for breakfast.
Good.
But yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of your sentiments. It's been a blast to record this, and I hope that people who listened really enjoyed our discussions. I know we did a lot of like weekly breakdowns of the gaming news and the fight news, and talking about the fights and previewing the fight cards. And I think that those were a lot of fun, but I really enjoyed doing kind of like these off the wall things, like building our own fighters and creating Street Fighter style UFC game, and episodes like this where it's just like, hey, let's just talk about stuff that we love. And I hope that you guys enjoyed that as well. And yeah, I absolutely found an incredible friend in this show as well. And like, I don't see myself going to New York anytime soon without letting you know ahead of time that we should try to like grab lunch or something.
And I guarantee you, every time I go to Minneapolis, I'm going to hit you up.
Have you ever been to Minneapolis?
I have never been to Minneapolis, but I legitimately want to go. Like, number one, because I want to go to all the major league ballparks. So
Target
I have
Field
to at some point check
nice.
off the Twin Cities.
Target Field is pretty nice.
Yeah. Is it like a really good field? Like, you've been to ballparks.
I think PNC Park is, aside from Oriole Park at Camden Yards, which is always going to be my favorite, I think PNC Park in Pittsburgh is actually probably my favorite.
People love
ballpark.
PNC Park. People love Camden Yards. I know that.
Camden Yards was a revolutionary stadium in its time.
My introduction to Camden Yards was probably different than yours. You probably just went to a game. Me, it was playing the home run derby in Ken Griffey Jr. Presents Major League Baseball.
And hitting it
and
off
I'm
the
like, well, why am I
warehouses.
hitting the ball and it's like hitting like this building?
Well, Griffey actually did that in real life in the home run derby. Do you remember that?
No, I wasn't watching baseball until after that, actually.
So that was a famous sequence where Griffey was in the home run derby when the All-Star game was at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, and he hit it off the warehouse when he was doing his home run derby, and that was amazing. But yeah, I mean, I would say Target Field, it's a great field, but PNC Park is just unrivaled with its view of downtown Pittsburgh. And like, especially if you catch a game in like the evening and the sun starts setting, it's magical in its views.
Have you been to the New York ballparks? Like, obviously
No.
they've been replaced too. So
I've not.
I would say I'll give you the tip that Yankee Stadium is soulless. It lost every bit of charm that it used to have, but it also doesn't smell like urine in the hallways anymore, which is really nice.
That's a plus.
So I appreciate that part of it. But number two, Citi Field is quite solid. It's definitely an upper tier, like upper third ballpark, I think is fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely an upgrade over what I was told Shea was. I never went to Shea, but I heard it was terrible.
I should have gone
terrible
to
by
Shea,
the end,
just because my family's name is on it.
Yeah, you should have gone. That's a shame.
Yeah. However, I have been to Wrigley. I saw a game.
I've been to Wrigley too. I took
great.
my son's first ball game was at Wrigley Field the year that they won the World Series. So they were just waiting for me to bring a kid one day. He was a baby. We made it to the eighth inning though.
He broke the curse.
He did.
But I think that's a wrap on Ground and Pwned.
I think it is. That is a wrap on the Ground and Pwned podcast. If you liked what you've been hearing, that warms our hearts. Our full catalog will be live and it will live on our YouTube channel. And for the last time, would you kindly follow our social handles at Brian P. Shea and at Scott_Fontana on Twitter and Instagram for whichever ones we use.
And where can they find your podcast?
Oh, my podcast. You should find the Couchside Judges MMA podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you can find them. And also read my stuff on the New York Post. I write a lot about fighting. You'd like it.
And I can be found at the All Things Nintendo podcast every Friday, wherever you find your podcasts. And, of course, GameInformer.com for day-to-day stuff. Thank you so much again for listening to our show over the course of this year. It means so much that you joined us for this adventure. And, of course, please reach out to us on those aforementioned social channels and continue the conversation. Just because this show is over doesn't mean that we don't still love MMA and video games. So, for the last time, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games. We hope to chat with you soon.